So I'm going to ask you to take some time to consider a statement that I'm about to make. A statement which is not meant to function as a display. It is not meant to be theatrical, but it's a dramatic statement. What I would like you to do with that statement is not to react to it emotionally, even if it is theatrical, even if it is dramatic, even if it pushes your buttons, because that's not what I want from you. What I would like you to do with that statement instead is to think what it means to you. Within the context of your life, what does it actually mean to you? Okay, here is the statement, and I'll explain what I mean by this statement shortly, but this is what I want you to understand, and this is the basis of the teaching. So, again, it is consistent with the teaching and part of the teaching. And the statement that I want to make to you as a kickoff is that you are completely alone. You are absolutely and completely alone. Now, please take some time to consider the meaning of that statement. Really, in the Buddha Dharma, what we learn is that this continuum that we experience is experienced only because we consider self-nature to be inherently real. But that the continuum is experienced. You cannot say that there is no separation. Ultimately, however, because experientially we have that, you can't say that I'm not experiencing myself as Ahkon Lhamo and you're not experiencing yourself as Kathy. You can't say that. That would be putting a Band-Aid on something that was experientially true, that you have going on now. In the ultimate sense, however, we realize that this experience of continuum, this belief in self-nature as being inherently real, is a deluded process. And that once we uncover that delusion and we begin to solve it through meritorious activity, through our practice, through the achievements that we're trying to reach for now, the ego and all of the hatred, greed, and ignorance that comes with it becomes pacified. When that happens, we naturally awaken to the true nature. There is a natural awakening. It's almost like you don't say, oh, this isn't true, this is. But it's like waking up from a dream. Waking up from a dream, it's just like mists clear, and what's always been there becomes apparent. That nature becomes apparent. Well, maybe I'll just break off rather than ask you all to give me the adventures that you just had in consciousness in terms of trying to figure out what that statement is. But I want you to reflect on what you think that statement means, and let's just go on with it, because this really is a natural jumping off place, and you served us by saying what you did. Where we run into trouble with all of that is that we are operating from a dualistic perspective. Everything is experienced in a dualistic way. Everything. All experience occurs in that way, or it would not be experienced. I mean, listen to the statement. Everything is experienced in a dualistic way. Well, of course. All experience occurs in that way. Because experience can only happen when the mind is arrived in duality, is focused in duality. You see what I'm saying? That's the only way experience can happen. Because in order to experience, you have to experience what? How big? Where? There has to be some definition. In order for there to be definition, there has to be that dualistic mode operating. So, let's see if I can think of how to put this just right. We become caught up in this constant process of evaluation. Once self-nature is considered, once the idea of self-nature is even considered, once it arises, there automatically begins this knee-jerk reactive process of distinguishing self from other. That's the only way you can define self. It's the only way you can consider it. This dualistic mode begins, and it's very immediate, very tight, very automatic, very habitual, especially since we have been involved in that over a long period of time. So strong is that habit that we experience our own minds dualistically. We have no... It's not that the fundamental spacious nature is diminished. It's not that the primordial wisdom state is hidden in any way. It is not hidden. It's not that it's an embryo and needing to grow like that. It's not underdeveloped. It is such that there can be no... It is changeless. It is beginningless. It is endless. It is uncompromised. It cannot be altered in any way. That nature can bear no scrutiny, no definition, because in that state there is no such thing. But when we experience ourselves automatically in a dualistic way. We have to, because we are experiencing self. When we consider mind, when we consider our nature, since we have not achieved enlightenment and have not experienced that spaciousness, since we have no taste of the nature, since we are so completely, habitually preoccupied with distinction, with duality, and since that preoccupation is so tight and compulsive, when we think of our true nature, when we think of mind, we think of it as being some kind of externalized phenomena, the same as all other externalized phenomena that we have understood. We must think of it in that way, because that's the only way we can think. So mind itself, becomes something externalized. Anything that we identify with as our nature, if it's an intellectual process, becomes externalized. The idea of spaciousness becomes externalized. Space gets to be out there somehow. We don't understand spaciousness because, as our natural state, because we cannot experience our natural state. Do you see what I'm saying? We cannot experience our natural state. So spaciousness becomes an externalized thing. We aren't spacious. It becomes an externalized thing. When I say to you, our nature is very spacious, you're thinking of space out there. You don't know how not to do that until you have the experience of spaciousness. So mind to us becomes externalized to the degree that we even perform habitually. Perform is the key word there. In such subtle ways that even the most gossamer thin, subtle processes that occur are externalized also. We have no understanding, of anything that is like an awakening where one realizes the nature. We've been learning recently, beginning to scratch the surface of a certain grouping of teachings, and the subject really that we're scratching the surface of is to consider the mind as the true object of refuge, or the nature, the mind nature, the nature that is our nature, as the supreme object of refuge, the Buddha nature that is our nature, as the supreme object of refuge. But now we find, if we examine our minds by using a key question like, or a key statement like, we are completely alone, we find that we even externalize the goal. That the goal has become externalized, that the idea of mind has become externalized, that the idea of spaciousness has become externalized, that the idea of primordial wisdom has become externalized. We can't even think of primordial wisdom, which is our nature, without thinking of it as a substance, like milk or something that you could like get more of, or that you have to have some. If you really examine your mind, you do not understand primordial wisdom or spaciousness as being the nature that is your nature, that you don't have to give birth to, that you don't have to eat, that you don't have to drink, that you don't have to practice, that you don't have to expand, and you don't have to contract. We don't understand that nature as being that, suchness. Because we've never had that experience, and every experience that we've had has been one of duality. We are literally caught in a trap in which we are constantly performing, even within our own minds, constantly performing. We do not understand that every thought that we think, we evaluate in some way once we become used to thinking of things in those terms. I mean, a dog wouldn't evaluate necessarily its perceptions, but human beings would. We evaluate in such a way as to determine their goodness or their badness, their rightness or their wrongness. And the evaluation takes place considering things in such a dualistic way that, for instance, if what we're thinking is wrong, then there is something else that is right, and it's probably out there somewhere, and we have to get it or be it somehow. We play against ourselves. You said yourself, the statement, "You are all alone," means to you that you are ultimately responsible. But what that also means is that there is no one with a counter or a checkbook that's checking off your merits and demerits. Yet we are constantly discriminating in that way as though there were. We are constantly checking our own book. When you sit down to practice, what is your goal? Is it to awaken? Never! Not once! Your goal is to have a good practice. Who's watching? Is your own nature so divorced from you that it's out there and you have to get it to approve of you? Do you think you have to dupe it into coming home? Is it like a stray cat? When we make offerings, do we do so to realize the nature, to awaken? No, it's like putting food out so the cat will come. Isn't it just like that? Aren't we like that in our minds? I see you constantly seeking approval when there's no one else in the room. No one's looking. Who are you posing for? What can you be thinking? What is the goal? What do you want? Do you want, what is the result? What can you have by seeking approval? What is the best case scenario? Think it through. The best case scenario is that you know everyone in the world's not going to approve of you. You must have known that when you put on robes. You must have known that when you picked up a mala. You must have known that when you've made most of the choices that you've made. So the best case scenario is that some people will approve of you all the time. Have you ever had a person approve of everything that you've done all the time? Who has had that? Please, I would like to meet that person. There has never been such a person. And there never will be, and you're not so stupid that you don't know that. Isn't that the truth? So the best case scenario is that you can have some approval from some people some of the time until you die. Now, let's examine being in the room all by yourself and seeking approval as you do. Like, for instance, when you're practicing alone. What's the best case scenario there? I mean, think it through. Think it through. Okay, let's say that you like, look at it not on a practice level. Let's look at it on a human level. Let's say that there's a certain kind of person that you really want to be and you really like. Let's say you want to be clever. You really like clever people. You like people with answers, smart people. And you really like people that dress a certain way and they act a certain way. So when you're all alone, you think of clever things in your mind, don't you? And you act a certain way in your mind, don't you? And you probably dress for the part, don't you? Think about it. How deep this deception is, isn't it? Isn't it just incredibly, awesomely deep? How much of your energy do you spend trying to be right? Think about it. Every time you have a conflict in your life, how do you resolve it? In your head. And you're right. Isn't it true? Every single time, without exception, isn't it true? Occasionally, you can be honest enough to say, oh, I really messed up. But wasn't it nice of me to admit that? So you're still right. You're still right. And it's in your head. There's no one listening. When you win those arguments that you lost with the other person in your head, we are so deluded that we think someone's in there applauding us. Is that crazy or what? Think about it. We're looking at it from a very superficial way and a fun way so that we can really apply it to our lives and really get a picture of it. It's good to get a picture of it, isn't it? So that we can see what we mean. But let's go a little bit deeper. On a deeper level, we must come to understand that mind is not external. In order to make any real progress. Because the real progress is only made when we become ultimately and completely responsible. Ultimately and completely responsible in such a way that we do not wait to see how the you-know-what hits the fan. Whenever we are involved in life circumstances, we don't wait to see if we've gotten away with it. How many times, think about it, how many times have we done something and just waited to see if we got away with it? If we pulled it off? Been deceptive in some way? You know? Done something not quite right? And then the moment we wait to see if we got away with it, and if really this is how we are. If the house doesn't fall in on us, if we don't have hailstorms on our head, if we don't have a sign from who I don't know, then we think we got away with it. Right? Isn't it true? How many times have we been deeply involved in some series of events within our lives that we allow ourselves to react strongly to in a secret way, even after having all the teachings that tell us that this kind of reaction is only a display of our own stupidity and our own ignorance, and will only bring negative result, that a moment's hatred can bring rebirth in a hell realm, according to the teaching. Depending on how you're suited up in the other areas of your life. That these kinds of reaction can bring about worlds of additional cause and effect relationships, worlds of karmic interaction in the time yet to come. We've heard the teaching, and we're not stupid. We have seen how that may be possible. We have seen the convolution of cyclic existence, how complicated it gets, and how one thing begets another and begets another and begets another, and how that constantly happens. We've seen that with our own eyes. Yet we allow ourselves, don't we, to have this kind of reaction process. And you know why we allow ourselves to do it? Because we're doing it inside. So long as we hold it in, that's okay. Isn't that right? The problem is that most of us get so fired up and so unstable and so diluted and poisoned that we can't even manage to hold it in. Eventually, we will show our behinds, won't we? There really aren't any secrets. It all comes out in the wash. How does this happen? This happens because of our strong delusion, our belief, I should say, instead of belief, I should say our fixation on this divided perception, this difference between self and other, this continual process of duality. And it's so deep that that duality occurs within our most intimate mind experience. The bottom line is that we have externalized our own nature. And the bottom line of that is that we find we are crippled, unable to take responsibility. Clearly the teachings have said we walk through the door of liberation alone. And clearly we are all waiting to be helped through. Do we really understand that we have to transfer our consciousness from ignorance to wisdom at the time of our death? Or are we approaching that like a magical formula? Do this, no matter how ignorant you are, and you'll be okay. What are we talking about here? Where is our understanding? When we sit down to practice, are we aware that only according to our efforts will we ever awaken? The Buddha taught it himself. When he left this world, he said, I have given you the path, work out your own salvation. Basically, in a nutshell, that's what he said. And what he meant was, there's the road, but you got the feet. Well, we think to ourselves, then what's the big deal about devotion? I mean, I just have it set up, like Tashi said, I have it set up where when I die, I'll just remember to call out to my root guru. And I'll be fine, because I got all this faith. Then you don't understand faith. The only faith that we understand really is something more like an emotional experience. It's kind of like, I like her, therefore she'll be there. If I like her enough, she'll be there faster. It's meaningless. Real devotion purifies the mind. It crushes the ego, crushes it until there's nothing left. Utterly destroys ego clinging. If you have the opportunity to practice that kind of devotion, then start now. If you don't have that kind of karma, think of something else, because that's what counts. But the bottom line is, all of us must purify our minds, or we will continue in the delusion that we are operating under now, and will have no opportunity to awaken to the Buddha nature. But that's not what we're doing. Can you see the difference? We are standing outside of our own experience, manipulating ourselves and externalizing our own minds in the same way that we manipulate all phenomena and externalize all phenomena. Granted, in the beginning, this is a very difficult idea to approach simply because our minds are so unstable. They jump around like frogs. They're just so punchy that any stimulation causes them to completely be off balance and jump around in the most extraordinary way, doing all kinds of acrobatics. But you have the method to stabilize your mind. You have meditation. You have recitation. You have visualization. Is that what you're trying to do with your visualization? Is that what you're trying to do with your meditation? Is that what you're trying to do within the context of your ordinary experience? Do you take every single event as an opportunity to continue your practice of stabilizing the mind? If so, then you wouldn't constantly be seeking approval. You wouldn't constantly be playing games in your head. You wouldn't constantly be trying to be right. You would be a real practitioner. Who among us can say that this is the case with us? Don't be looking at the other people. You can't tell what they're doing from the outside. And that's another trick too. You know what we do? We spend a lot of time thinking about other people and how they're doing and how wrong they are. When in fact you cannot look at another person and know what they're like inside their mind. Their karma is invisible to you. Their minds are invisible to you. You have no idea what you're dealing with. There is one thing that you know, though. You can look inside your own mind. But that's what we don't do. No one will go with you at the time of your death. At that time, you will either recognize something of the nature or you will not. You will either do it through devotion, or you will do it through sadhana practice, or you will do it through some other method that the Enlightened One left us. There are no free rides, none. And if you've been wearing those robes, or if you've been practicing your practices without really understanding that this is so, then you've wasted your time. Can you see that? Can you see that that must be true? Yes or no? So what's the next step? What should you do? I don't know what it says in the books, but I know that when I come to a place like this, the next step for me is to get myself in hand. To make a firm, no compromise commitment. To be responsible for myself. To look into my mind. To know that what I end up with at the end of this life is what I have. And that will be either the clarity of my mind stream, the ability to perceive the nature, or a lot of rotten karma. Issues like this, if we really take them to heart, answer lots of questions, like when will I find time to practice? It's like this. If you knew you were going to die in 3 days, and you understood that only you can negotiate in the bardo, that only you can recognize the nature when it comes time to recognize the nature, you think you'd find time for practice? What do you think? You know, some of us wouldn't. You know that? Some of us would spend a lot of time saying goodbye to our relatives. Some of us would spend a lot of time seeing something one more time so that we can have a feeling. It's that thick. You have to handle it. And you're the only one that can. The ultimate source of refuge, the ultimate refuge, is your nature and none other. The ultimate method can only be employed by you. The ultimate result is no phenomena. It is the precious awakening. And one can only accomplish that through this kind of awesome acceptance of responsibility. It isn't pleasant in one way, because we're trained to think that there's an easy answer, an easy fix, right? We were brought up in a culture in which they said, have faith, what will be, will be. Or, you know, call out for somebody's name and then you'll go to heaven. Or, just don't commit these mortal sins and you'll get to heaven eventually. We have all kinds of funny, mindless things that we do. So in one way, it seems hard to find out that you're really responsible, doesn't it? I've had people come to me and say, this is hard. I'd rather think there's a God I can ask for help. In that sense, because of our delusion, this seems difficult. But what they forget is that people have been calling out for help since they had mouths, since the beginning of time. And nobody's happy. Nobody. Nobody's finished with suffering. To find out that there is a method and that you can apply it through strength, through determination, through consistency, and through purity, and that it does lead to the cessation of suffering and has, ought to be good news. When will you accept that responsibility? When will you be responsible to yourself? When will you have that kind of dignity and respect for yourself? When will you start taking care of yourself? You must internalize this concept that the ultimate refuge is your own nature. That there is no one watching, no one pushing, no one prodding. That salvation is your own mind. You must understand that in order to make progress.
Thank you so very much for joining with us today, and hope you enjoyed the teaching. The next event today on our calendar here at KPC is Khenpo Karze. He will be teaching in person and on Zoom, and I'll put in the chat what the Zoom link is, just in case you join. No pressure here. Okay, so I got that. And it will be at 11:30 our time, Eastern time, which is about 45 minutes. So he will start, and he will do a meditation. It's a pretty casual event. We have lots of different people, and so he's teaching to the public. So it's teaching and Q&A, and then a very short Shinrezi practice to close. With all of that going on, it takes maybe an hour or so, hour and a half. and people ask questions, and it's been a lot of fun. We've only just started it. We're just getting going. But join us. We just love it if you. We will be on Zoom, and we'll hopefully be able to take some of your questions if you have them. Anyway, that's what's next up on our today's roster. Later this evening, our soak practices these days are now at 7 p.m. and tonight's will be Riggs and Dupa, because it is, I think it's Riggs and Dupa, because it's Guru Rinpoche Day, I think. What have I missed here? Just taking a quick look. Yes, it is Guru Rinpoche Day, and it is Riggs and Dupa at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I know we're on daylight savings time, so we're all a little frazzled and off kilter. I know the clock that I'm looking at is an hour off, but I can't reach it, so that's the way it is. Anyway, so let's move forward. We also have meditations on Saturdays at 10 a.m. We have a Medicine Buddha practice on Facebook. The meditation, by the way, is in person and on YouTube. Medicine Buddha is on Facebook, and that is every evening at 5:30 p.m. I gave you the soak times at 7 p.m. You can check all of this on the calendar, which is on our website, tara.org, T-A-R-A. And that is, it's got a calendar where if you just go on the website and scroll to the bottom of the first page, and there'll be a link there to it. It'll say webcasts and calendar, and so you just click on the calendar. When you click on an event, it'll give you the codes and that sort of thing. So you can get on, and it'll also give you a link to the practice so you can join in, and we do our best to help you out and ask us questions in the chat. Please join us if you can. If you're in the area, we're just outside of Washington, D.C., and we have beautiful property with walking trails, meditation gardens, and lots of, a bunch of stupas, and also some farm animals and some gardens, and just a fair amount of things to see and do. We spend a lot of time working to take care of other people who need food and clothing and that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of activity going on in that direction. So, just trying to keep everybody all together. So join us, or just come and experience it, relax, and have a wonderful time. Week, we'll be back next Sunday, same time, and with another teaching by Jetsunma. Thanks.